Houston Rockets fans have every right to be impatient right now. James Harden left unannounced, and the aftermath of that decision is being felt right now. The Houston Rockets rebuild is in full effect, and fans want them to ditch tanking and pursue for the playoffs this coming year. But in this video, I'm going to tell you the reasons why the Rockets should stay the course for the rebuild. And bonus material, I'm going to throw in a trade that's going to help this roster make the playoffs in 2024. First of all, the Rockets rebuild is unique for three key reasons. The first is the product of their continued success. Through constant trades to fortify this roster, the Rockets didn't make a selection in the first round from 2016 to 2020. Now, in 5 full years without a first-round pick gave the Rockets no bridge to the future, and the Harden era was all in as a franchise can be. Listen, it was meant when it ended there was bound to be a period of pain. We knew at some point it was going to happen, but not just 8 games into last season. So, we're learning on the fly. And even after Russell Westbrook asked for that trade, the Rockets, they intended to build a roster around James Harden capable of making another playoff push. And I can almost guarantee you that they would never have taken John Wall for Russell Westbrook, and they would have gotten a highly protected first-round pick. But when Harden asked for that trade just a few games in, the Rockets were basically hung out to dry. They had a roster designed to compete right away with Harden at the center. Without him, they had a dysfunctional 5, and the rebuild started. The third key to this rebuild, the franchise, they opted for an unprecedented draft haul over proven commodities with multiple years of team control. Now, the decision wasn't the wrong one necessarily, but it meant that there would be a few immediate gains from trading James Harden. Unless you're the biggest Victor Oladipo fan ever, the Harden trade improved the franchise's outlook for 2030, but it did hardly anything to move the needle in 2022. Now guys, the reality really is that the Rockets rebuild didn't begin in earnest until the summer of last year, and it began with no resemblance of a young core in place. And before they even made their 4 selections in last year's draft, they have only one player under the age of 25 in Kevin Porter Jr. Now, I get the resemblance to the Grizzlies. They're an example of a franchise that was able to avoid a multi-year tank to get back into the playoff picture. But the problem is only sort of true. It also disregards the massive differences between the state of the Rockets and the state of the Grizzlies. They're just two different entities. The Grizzlies made the playoffs every season from 2010 to 2017. They had their big 3 of Marc Gasol, Mike Conley, and Zach Randolph, while the team remained competitive and won 50 more games for 3 straight seasons. They didn't just cast aside first-round picks like Mardi Gras beats. Over the same time period, they made 4 first-round selections, and crucially, they didn't owe any first-round picks once they started their rebuild. Mike Conley, Marc Gasol were never superstars, but they have both made all-star teams. And when they were moved to the Grizzlies, they got picks and young players to help expedite their rebuild. Gasol landed them CJ Miles, Jonas Valanciunas, Delon Wright, and a 2024 second-round pick from the Raptors. And Conley, he was able to get Grayson Allen, Darius Bazley, Jay Crowder, Kyle Korver, and a 2020 first-round draft pick from the Jazz. And this is what makes a clear difference between the Rockets rebuild and the Grizzlies. There's a clear difference of the trades and picks that amounted to a handful of quality NBA rotation pieces for the Grizzlies. Essentially, guys, 4 first-round picks from 2011 through 2017, Mike Conley, Marc Gasol, ended up netting the Grizzlies Steven Adams, Zaire Williams, DeAnthony Melton, Brandon Clark, and a 2022 first-round pick. The Grizzlies rebuild was able to take flight when they did it at the top of the draft. Following a 22-60 season, the Grizz had the 4th pick and took Jaren Jackson Jr. The next season, they lucked into the 2nd overall pick and got John Morant. Now we all are seeing how that is going for them. The Grizzlies rebuild was a unique one, and it's just not comparable to the Rockets. Everyone has to remember, the Rockets are in their first intentional season of a rebuild. When they started their rebuild following the 2021 season, they had a bunch of the Nets picks, John Wall, Christian Wood, Kevin Porter Jr., and hopefully this year's first-round picks. But when should the Rockets actually try to win? The earliest I think the Rockets should look at upgrading their roster is after next season. Next season, they should still see them near the bottom of the league. The Western Conference will likely be much tougher as the Nuggets, Clippers, Trailblazers, and Pelicans will get all major boosts from injured stars returning. Not to mention the Lakers should expect way better health and better guard play. The Spurs, they have an interesting young core, and the Kings could win at least 35 games. The Rockets may also move Christian Wood, Eric Gordon, and if an acceptable offer is made, Jae'Sean Tate, but I hope not. If the Rockets landed a superstar in the draft this season, Jalen Green makes a jump, and Alperen Sengun shows he can play 32 minutes a night, they still shouldn't look to be a playoff team. The 2023 draft looks historic at the top, and from 2024 to 2026, the Rockets' drafts are in the hands of the Thunder, and in the offseason, the team will be flush with cap space. And come next summer, the franchise will have a much better idea of where the future is headed, and the flexibility to accommodate that. They'll have the ability to sign free agents and use the Brooklyn picks plus any assets they get for discarded veterans to fill out that roster around their young core. Now, does that mean they should be a playoff team in 2024? Not at all. It just means that the shameless asset and the talent hoarding phase of the rebuild will have run its course. Then the fun part of the rebuild can begin. Rebuilds are painful at first, you guys, but running from the pain doesn't make it happen any faster. And as promised, I have a trade for you guys that sends Christian Wood to the Brooklyn Nets. Let's get right into the trade. The Houston Rockets would receive Joe Harris, Nick Claxton on a sign-in trade, and a 2028 first-round pick from Brooklyn. The Brooklyn Nets, they would get Christian Wood and Eric Gordon. This trade should actually be appealing to both sides. True, the Nets will miss Joe Harris. He's an elite floor spacer, and at the same time, they acquired in Seth Curry at this year's trade deadline in the infamous James Harden deal. They're acquiring another comparable veteran in Eric Gordon here. They learned to live without Harris as he rehabbed an injury this season. They'll be completely fine without him. Meanwhile, Christian Wood and his elite positional shooting ought to do wonders for Simmons. He's the stretch five Simmons has never really had. Don't get me wrong, Embiid is a competent three-point shooter, but he camps out at the low block. You won't have that problem with Christian Wood, as he likes to sit beyond the arc in the corner. Now, if the Rockets hesitate one bit for this deal, it's just because they prefer not to make the Brooklyn Nets even better. After all, they own their picks for the foreseeable future. The return might be too much to pass up. Listen, the team has the second worst defensive rating in the NBA last season. Nick Claxton, a versatile big who can defend in space and protect the rim, offers a great deal of help. Getting one more pick out of Brooklyn doesn't hurt either. So that's it for today's video. But before we go, I have a question for you guys. Do you guys still believe in the Houston Rockets rebuild? And do you think that it's actually working? In my opinion, I believe in this rebuild 100%. The Rockets seem to be on pace for being able to make the playoffs in a couple years, and they have great talent in their young core, like Jalen Green. So let me know in the comment section what you guys think. And tomorrow, we'll be back better than ever with some more Houston Rockets basketball. But until then, like always, I'll save y'all a seat. Peace.